All right, everybody, welcome back to the third session of the Due Diligence Workshop. So last week, or I should say 2 weeks ago, because we didn't teach last week because I had to go get my granddaughter at the airport, we covered the first couple of sections, first half really, of the due diligence checklist all the way through location and site analysis. Today, we are going to pick up where we left off at political and legal analysis and go through the end of the checklist. So we're going to start off at political and legal. Before we get going, were there any questions about the last session? Okay, well, alrighty then. Title commitment. So it is perceived that you should spend as little money as possible to purchase a property. And so people will forego a title commitment. That's title insurance. So initially you get the title commitment, and then once the deal closes and you pay for title, you get title insurance. So let's talk a minute about what that does. So what title insurance does is anything that the title commitment does not find that is a lien or an encumbrance or something that could harm the financial situation of the transaction, then the title company is responsible for remedying it. So what they're telling you is they're giving you a document that says, here is everything we found, and then here are some exceptions, and we will not cover these exceptions. So it's the exceptions that you really got to take a look at. Most of the exceptions make sense, like a utility easement. They will not cover a utility easement. They're not going to cover a utility easement, nor should they. That utility easement runs with the transaction. We call it running with the land. So when you purchase the property, you're also purchasing that utility easement from the city, county, whatever it is. So it would be an exception. So let's go take a look at a title commitment. And we're going to look at this again later, but what I want to show you is the Schedule B, which is the exceptions from coverage. So you have following restrictive covenants. So these are recorded, and there's nothing you can do about this. Omitting any covenant or restriction based on race, color. So basically just telling you have to file or you have to operate under HUD guidelines. That's what this is saying. Any discrepancies, conflicts, or shortages in area or boundary lines, or any encumbrance or proportions or overlapping improvements, okay, because of a certain survey. So you're purchasing a survey, and in this case, we purchased an Alta survey, which covers title exceptions. Homestead or community property or survivorship rights, because this is an investment property. They are not going to cover homestead. Any title or rights asserted by anyone, including but not limited to persons, the public, corporations, governments, or entities. 2, tied lands, lands beyond the line or harbor, filled in lands. This is all stuff that this property was purchased in Texas. This is all stuff that is specific to Texas and applies to owner policy only, because the lender is going to get a policy as well. And make no mistake, you are paying for the lender's policy. Typically, the seller will pay for the owner policy and you will pay for the lender policy. In a very, very tight market like we've been in, and you're competing for assets because you made the mistake of going through a broker to get the deal, then more than likely you're paying all closing costs and you're paying for your own title insurance. But under normal circumstances and normal market conditions, the seller typically will pay for owner title insurance. So there's no excuse not to get it, especially when the lender is going to require it anyway. So let me see if I can find something here. Materials furnished, labor, liens and leases that affect the title of the land but are subordinate. Coverage express insurance Schedule B of Texas shorter. The following matters creating, offering evidence, rights of parties of possession, visible apparent easements, all leases, oil, gas, blanket right of way. Okay, so oil, gas, and mineral rights were removed from the deed. So the original developer kept those rights. So in other words, when you purchase a property, you get everything above the property. You have air rights. You also have mineral rights, everything below the property, unless there's an exception. And somewhere along the line, there was an exception in the deed that was added to remove your mineral rights, everything below the surface. You still had air rights. You no longer had below surface rights. So you have to pay attention to that, because if, especially living in Texas, if you were expecting to be able to drill for oil, in this case, you would not be able to. And then other right of ways that have been executed by other deeds that have been recorded, they didn't matter much from what we looked at. And when we had our Alta survey, it showed us that none of this affected what we were doing. Still continuing, there's another easement. There was a memorandum of lease executed between SHS Ventures, which is who sold us, and Rayanne Place, and CoinMac. So CoinMac, what this is saying, and you've heard me say before that in the contracts, you want to pay attention to anything that you cannot get out of, a contract you cannot get out of. CoinMac is basically assuring in their situation here that you cannot get out of their contract. CoinMac is the vendor for your washing machines and dryers in your laundry room in this case. So these are all the exceptions. And then you get into other schedules, but Schedule B is the one you really want to take a look at. All right. So that's on the due diligence checklist to go over your title commitment. Okay. And that's what you're looking for, that exceptions, section B. Okay. Look for building code violations. There were a couple when we found this property. We went to we went to planning and zoning, asked them for their code enforcement division, and we talked to the chief inspector, and the chief inspector said there's 2 violations on the property. One was a big one, one was a simple one, but one was a big one. The big one was the railing, the banisters, the vertical bars in the banisters were greater than 4 inches center to center apart from each other. That is a health and safety violation for small children because they can stick their head through it. So it is required that your vertical stanchions on your banisters for anything that goes upstairs or has an upper level deck cannot be any greater than 4 inches center on center. That's building code. So there was a major violation on that had to be fixed. We wouldn't have known that if we had not have gone and checked with the city. And that would have been the first thing the city would have come after as soon as we closed on the property. So we took that opportunity to say, okay, and the chief inspector was complaining about the previous owner and how bad the property was and how bad the residents were. And we requested a meeting between economic development, the chief inspector, the planning commission, and anybody else that would have a meeting with us. And we scheduled it on a date for the next time we were going to be at the property, and we all met together and we came up with a plan to improve this property. And we ended up getting help from the city. They started putting more police patrol. We had a police officer that was willing to rent one of the units for us at half price. And so we could clean this property up, and they were happy that we were purchasing this property. So you can build relationships through your due diligence process at the same time, even before you close on the property. You also want to ask them while you've got them, are there any licenses that are required? If there are, what are they? And does this property have them? That way, you know if there's going to be any additional expense for that. ask the city for the certificate of occupancy. If the owner doesn't have it, they will provide that. We had to get the certificate of occupancy from the city. The owner didn't have it, but they did issue it to us because we assured them, we showed them in our business plan and had money from the lender to do it. We showed them that we were going to replace those banisters, and so they gave us their certificate of occupancy. Otherwise, they had planned on holding that certificate of occupancy until it was done. Fire and safety, you want to look at or find out from the building code division while you've got them. Were there any fire and safety hazards, issues? In this case, it was just the banisters. Estoppels. Somebody tell me what an estoppel is, if you know.
I'll take a swing, David. It establishes the current status of lease terms.
Correct. Do you need that in a multifamily transaction?
It would be useful to see if any of the tenants have claims against the landlord.
Well, if there were claims against the landlord, it'd be filed in public record, and title would have found it.
Okay. Okay. And so do you actually need it in the multifamily?
Who does estoppels?
Lawyer.
A lawyer. Okay. Do you not have a lease agreement in place? It is a short term compared to commercial. It is a 1 year, a 12-month, sometimes less, short-term lease with everything in it. If you want more than that, and you're willing to pay an attorney to draft, submit, get signed, notarized, and sent back, discovered, and presented, more power to you. Estoppels were never meant for residential properties. Yet I hear investors all the time talk about, we got to get estoppels. Go ahead and pay for it. You won't pay for title insurance, but you'll pay for estoppels. Stupid is as stupid does. That's all I'm going to say. We've never been bit by, and look, attorney sends document to, and it delays because you have to wait for them to respond. The attorney isn't going to go to the property. They're going to mail it. Certified mail. What do most people that are bad actors do with certified mail?
Ignore it.
Circular file. And they'll just lie anyway. Please confirm your lease amount is $750. It's $500. Even though your lease agreement says $750. So yeah, estoppels are a waste of time and money and will delay the transaction, and you're getting an attorney involved when you don't have to in a residential transaction. Make no mistake, a 300-unit apartment complex is a residential transaction. Now, think in your mind, and this was a 39-unit, by the way, not 300. Think in your mind, what would 300 estoppel certificates cost you written by an attorney who isn't going to write it? They're going to print an already written one, but they're going to tell you they wrote 300 of them. What would that cost you? It would be cost prohibitive. Estoppels were created for retail, office, and industrial, for commercial leases, not residential leases. And then if there was any previous work done, and you should be able to get a list of capital improvements that have been done to the property, you can check again while you have the chief inspector from the code division. Hey, any previous permits pulled or any violations for permits not being pulled that we need to know of. And you can find that out at that point. Okay. So that's political and legal. Any questions on political and legal? Nope.
You know, I was just curious under the title thing. What is the homestead rule? What is that?
So in the South, primarily,
Yeah.
your property tax is based on whether you are claiming homestead, meaning it's your primary residence, or you're an investor, so it's a second home, third home, fourth home, apartment complex, retail building, da 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 da. So it's your primary residence or it's not. Homestead, you pay in most cases half of the property tax that you would normally pay if it's an investment.
Very interesting.
See,
And
up in where you live in the West Coast and Northeast, they have what do they call it? SALT.
I'm not sure, David.
Yeah, it's I can't remember what SALT stands for, but it has to do with property tax and limiting your property tax based on your income, because the property taxes are so high and up in those areas. And I don't remember what the acronym was. There was a big, before I stopped watching the news, there was a big debate about it when Trump was redoing the tax code. It eliminated that from those states.
Oh, it was the tax deduction. It capped it at 10 grand.
Yeah, I don't know what it was. Never lived in. I've
Yeah.
never owned property. Well, that's not true. I did own property in California, but only one, and it was Fresno, so it didn't matter anyway. I only paid $99,000 for it. Well, I wish I still owned that thing.
And you know, if
Be over $1 million today.
yeah, really, if somebody maintains the mineral rights, they wouldn't be able to trespass on your land, though, to go after it, would they?
No.
It's only if they can access it from a surrounding property, right? If they know the stuff's there, they would just retain it, stop you tapping into the same.
Well, typically when they do that, they're
Yeah,
doing it for legacy. They know there's an economic life to assets, and that, 100 years from now, that property could be dust and it could be back to a leveled lot again. And their ancestors may be able to access those mineral rights at that time.
Wow.
So it becomes a legacy play.
Interesting.
Some are banking on the fact you don't pay attention to that and you strike oil, and then guess who gets the oil? Not you. Any other questions about political and legal? Very, very important piece of the pie. You cannot skip political and legal. Okay, let's talk about the management company. So now we've made it through financial analysis, market analysis, location and site analysis, and political and legal. Those are our 4 legs to our stool. If you remember when we started this process, we talked about the strategic analysis model, okay, and having those 4 legs: market analysis, location and site, political and legal, and financial. We've covered all 4 legs at this point. We've made the decision, okay, things are looking good. Let's move forward. Now, that doesn't mean you have to wait till this point to have a management company. You may already have a management company you've been using. If you do, and I mentioned this in the last class, have them, or have the property manager, and if you have a full-time maintenance guy, walk that property with you. Even if it's an on-site management company, have one of their regionals walk the property with you, okay? But if you don't have that management company yet, you don't have that ability to do so. So we've got in the strategic partnering workshop, for those that are new on here, for Sheena and Sareda, and maybe even Marielle, in, I think it's module 11, where I talk about property management. There is a 49 question questionnaire, and one of the video modules goes over every single question that you should ask a property management company when hiring them, whether they're on site or whether they're off site. And I used to own a property management company, so I might know what I'm talking about. Then again, I might be talking about my backside. You can be the decision on that. I don't own that management company anymore. There was one thing I learned about property management. It was that Restaurants do not have the lowest margins. You can take that for what it's worth. All right. So management company, it's set up here so you can do 3 interviews, the date you interview them, and just some very, very brief notes, experience, yes, fees, check supplement or check notes or whatever you want to put in here. But experience, do they have experience in the exact kind of property type that you're looking for? If they're an off-site management company, meaning they're managing properties that are probably 40 to 50 units or lower, you don't want to hire that company or even interview them for a 300-unit apartment complex. If they're a single family management company and you have a 26-unit apartment building, I'm probably not looking at that single family company to cut their teeth in apartments with me. They can cut their teeth with somebody else. Are there any fees associated with their contracts? Are there any incentives that they're looking for? If they want a bonus for every lease they sign, move on. We don't pay bonuses for leases, not new ones. That incentivizes them to churn every lease, because if they're getting a bonus for a new lease, they get paid more for new leases. So why would they renew a resident? So we want renewals. So incentivize renewals. Do not incentivize new leases. The exception to that would be if you're doing a value add and you're renovating an apartment and it's an initial lease, you can incentivize them for that initial lease, especially if they can pre-lease it. Maybe have a bigger bonus for pre-leasing than waiting until the apartment is ready. That you can incentivize for, but beyond that, just for renewals. No new leases beyond that initial lease agreement. That pretty much covers leasing. Do they have additional leasing fees? Some will ask for a fee that is as much as first month's rent. So you need to find out what those are. How do they handle evictions? Do they have their own attorney, or do we have to use our attorney? In the United States, we have the right to represent ourselves. As David Monroe, the manager of Volare LLC, and Volare at Longview was what we renamed the property. It was originally called Rayanne Apartments. We named it Volare at Longview, and Volare LLC was the LLC that we created to purchase this asset. David Monroe is the manager of Volare LLC. I am allowed to represent myself. So can I evict a resident in court without attorney representation? Yes or no?
Yes.
Roger says yes. Susan says yes. Anybody else?
No.
Marielle says no. Okay, so we have some conflicting. Soretta or Sheena, you guys have a opinion on this or a guess? Make no mistake, I'm going to tell you the answer. Okay. So you are allowed to represent yourself. Do you own the property? Now Roger's thinking, do I? Who owns the property, Roger? Who has title to the property?
Your company.
Volare LLC has title to the company. LLCs, companies, are not allowed to represent themselves in the United States. So as the manager of Volare LLC, I am not allowed to represent because I do not have a Juris Doctorate, a JD, which is the legal way of saying I'm an attorney in that state, or any state for that matter, because I am not an attorney. So I cannot represent Volare LLC because I am not an attorney. And because I don't have title to the property, I can't represent myself. Make sense? So you must hire an attorney to evict a resident. Now, some cities around the country, and where I live is one of them, believe it or not, in this Republican state that I live in Mobile, Alabama, the court system will appoint a court-appointed attorney to a resident to represent them in the transaction. So be careful of that. Okay. So find out how your property management company is going to do evictions. Do they have an attorney, or are you using your company's attorney, your LLC's attorney? Because you cannot represent yourself. Okay. And then find out what those fees and everything are and the whole process. If you've never invested in that state before, you're going to want to know what landlord-tenant law is. How long do we have to give notice? How long is the notice? How many notices before the judge finally says enough and just kicks them out? States will have all those different rules. You need to know all that. Preventative maintenance. You guys will find out when you watch module 11 in the strategic partnering workshop that property management is all about preventative maintenance. If you have a preventative maintenance plan, so what you're asking here is, what is your preventative maintenance plan? Do you have one? Have them explain it to you. And I talk about that extensively in the workshop. Preventative maintenance will save your property from having deferred maintenance. These are things like inspecting all the fire extinguishers on a monthly basis, having them hydrostatically tested every year, which are required by fire and safety regulations, having your smoke detectors checked every month, having your filters replaced every month, having your HVAC systems at least checked every quarter and charged every 6 months, checking the dates on your hot water heaters, making sure there's no leaks in your hot water heaters or leaks underneath the sinks. So you are walking into residents' apartments every single month, maintenance is, and if you break it up to where they're doing 1/3 1 month, 1/3 the next month, 1/3 the next month, then you can do your quarterlies at the same time. So you're able to knock all this stuff out, okay? Preventative maintenance is the key to operating your property, okay? Leasing is just a small portion of it. Preventative maintenance will absolutely put your residents in love with you. Now, there's other things you have to do, but if you are doing these things for them, they are going to be very, very happy. Capital improvements. What is your capital improvement plan? Does the property management company offer project management? Is it the property manager or is it somebody separate? If it's the property manager, move on. You do not want your property manager being your project manager. They're only going to be good at one of them, not both. How do they handle the bank accounts? Do we have to open the bank accounts? Are they going to open the bank accounts? If they open the bank accounts, make sure you're a signature and known as owner on those bank accounts. So if you fire that property management company, you have access to your money. They can't run off with your money. Okay, so it's okay for them. And when I owned my management company, we opened the bank accounts, but we always made sure that the owners were signatures on those bank accounts and that we couldn't just close the accounts without their signatures. Okay, so be very careful of that. Don't do that. Reporting. How often do they report? You're going to want them to report at a minimum of monthly. Really, you want them to report monthly. And then how do you want them to report? Do you want them to do like an owner's report? Do you want them to send a T12 and a current rent roll, a summary? How is that reporting going to work? Okay. Management agreement. How many pages is your management agreement? Is it 250 pages or is it 10 pages or is it a single page? Probably going to go with the 10-page agreement. Just be honest. Single page, that ain't enough. 250 pages is 250 pages of nothing but about them. And then if there's going to be any on-site staff, you want to interview that on-site staff, all right? If they do not allow you to interview the on-site staff, move on. You have the right to interview the on-site staff. Okay. Questions on management company. Again, module 11 in the strategic partnering workshop covers property management in great detail. I think, what did we do? 2 or 3 videos on that? It's pretty lengthy. Okay. Now, we're getting ready to close this bad boy. Okay. We've got our property management company. We've got our lender. We've done our due diligence. Hopefully, if we've had to raise capital, we have our capital. And now we're preparing to close. So what do we need to close this thing? Well, we need a loan commitment from the lender. Okay. So the loan commitment does not mean that you've signed any loan documents. You do not sign loan documents until you are at the closing table, but you need a loan commitment. So I've pulled up some documents from when we closed Rayanne Apartments. Here was the term sheet, our loan commitment that we got from our lender. Now, you're going to see in a minute that we paid, our purchase price was $995,000 for 39 units. Yes, that's a pretty good price. This was 2018. Is that the date on this? Yeah, 2018. In 2018, it was a true 10.5 cap on existing financials. I don't do pro forma. On existing financials, we got a 10.5 cap in Northeast Texas, Longview, Texas. Right. So again, the Laureate Longview LLC, that was the borrower, not David Monroe. They were going to give us $1,040,000. Well, wait a minute. Thought you said the purchase price was $995,000. Yeah, it was. So what's that called? If I get $1,040,000 and I only ask for the purchase price only $995,000, what is that? Is that loan to value or is that loan to cost?
Loan to value.
No, sir. That is loan to cost.
Really?
Yes, sir. That is loan to cost because they still required that we put money down. So in this case, it says estimated at 80% of completed value. So when the property was completed, based on a pro forma, it was based on 80% of that, with a minimum of 15% of as completed value placed down at closing. So they wanted 15%. Well, it actually worked out to be about 30%. So we ended up putting down $335,000. So even though, and that's why it's not loan to value. So they gave us $1,040,000, but it was not a no money down deal. That would have been 100% loan to value. We still put $335,000 down. So it was a 70% loan to value. It was a 100% loan to cost. Does that make sense to everybody? That's how you get your renovations paid for. And this was short-term bridge debt, but we knew the plan. We already had everything ready to go. And we had Freddie waiting on standby to refi us out. So everything was in place before we took this. And it was in an expansion market, not in a down market like we're in now. All right. So here is what we got. This was the term out from Freddie that they were looking at. This was our term from Freddie. So we had a term sheet, term in, term out, signed by them, signed by us. Hey, look at, that's my signature. From Bancorp South. It was a bridge lender. Okay. So that's your term sheet. So make sure you have that in place. Where'd my document go? There it is. That's the loan commitment. Loan commitment, term sheet, same thing. Okay. Next is the insurance binder. When do you receive it? When do you review it? What's the cost? So the cost for the loan commitment was 1%. So it cost us 10 grand to get that loan commitment. And when we closed, the lender, that guy, Sneed that you saw, bought me a bottle of one of my favorite scotches as a thank you for using them to get the loan. Now, okay, you just saw I got a 100% loan to cost, a 70% LTV. We had never invested in the state of Texas. We had never syndicated a deal before. I did not have the liquidity and net worth to take the loan down. I had never had a Fannie and Freddie loan signed before, yet we were able to get a term sheet signed by both the lender and Freddie. But yet you guys are being told you have all these restrictions. I'm just saying. It's not black and white. The reason we were able to do it is because we had a great business plan. We didn't buy it on pro forma, and our freaking underwriting was spot on. You got those in place, they'll reduce their requirements for you. They'll still want the liquidity and they'll still want the net worth. But again, you can have that accumulative for the whole team. There were 5 of us on the team. Okay. So just don't live in a black and white world, because we're not in a black and white world. Just because a guru tells you this is the way it is, that's crap. Okay. I just proved it. All right. Insurance binder. You want to have your insurance in place before you close. They're going to require it. Okay. Here was our insurance, proof of insurance, effective date, May 31st. Okay. For Valari at Longview LLC, there was the property's address. Here's what we were being insured for. We had a $5,000 deductible. And Graham Mortgage, which was the mortgage broker, was the mortgagee and marked as additionally insured. My buddy Mark McWilliams, very, very good friend of mine here in Mobile, Alabama, wrote the policy for us. Okay, so we had our insurance binder in place. Title insurance. Remember that title commitment up here? Political and legal. Now we want to make sure we have the full-blown title insurance. So you want to get the whole title insurance from your title company and review the whole thing now, not just the exceptions. Okay, so you want to review the whole policy. All right, there was our whole policy. LLC documents filed. Got to have your LLC documents. You want to get those in. All right. You don't have to file them prior to closing, but you're definitely going to have, nope, actually you will have to have them filed prior to closing. Sorry. You are going to need the SEC documents filed. I'm sorry, the LLC documents. The SEC documents don't have to be filed right away, but your LLC documents do. So if we go back, in our case, the LLC documents was our operating agreement and our articles of organization. So here was our Valari at Longview LLC operating agreement. And I'm going to bring it down to one section of it. Let's see, what did I have highlighted here? Required contributions. Look at there. The reason this is highlighted like this is because the SEC attorney we hired made the determination we did not need a private placement memorandum. So he saved us some money and he just put the disclosures that were required in the operating agreement. And that is perfectly legal. Don't try to do it on your own. Make sure that your attorney says you can do that. Okay. So our SEC attorney did not do a PPM for us. We just did a operating agreement. And the reason is because the investors that we had, there were 9 of them, and all 9 investors knew us intimately. They were our friends, they were our colleagues, or they were our family. So we knew who they were, okay? And that's one of the reasons that the attorney said, you guys don't need a PPM. You pay for a PPM if you want it, you don't need it. So we trusted him and we went with just an operating agreement. I want to get this down to a piece that we're going to need and show you. Right. Where is it? There was the schedule. And of course, all their names were listed here. Right now it says 100% because nobody else is listed. But as we listed all the names, the interests went down. Obviously. There we go, the joinder. So we're going to need this here shortly. Okay, so get your LLC documents filed and let your attorney do all that. Okay. Any SEC documents that need to be filed. We only had one at the time because we did not have a PPM, but we did have to file the subscription agreements. Okay. So the attorney did do up a subscription agreement for us. And like with any subscription agreement, it has the qualifications for whether you are accredited or not accredited. Okay. We were allowed, there was a 506B. Actually, I can't remember if we did a 504 or a 506B. I think technically it was a 506B, but we didn't have to mention that anywhere because we didn't do a PPM. We just had to follow the rules under 506B. Okay, so that was the subscription agreement. And I'm not going to show you any that are filled out because that just wouldn't be right. If you're not putting your disclosures in your LLC agreement, then you're going to want to, if you have investors, you're going to want to have a PPM in addition to the subscription agreement. All escrows funds wired. Okay, so there was our wiring instructions. I'm not going to scroll down any further than that, although it doesn't matter. These accounts are closed now, but there was our company. AM Equity Group was the manager to, which I was a manager of, was the manager to Valari at Longview LLC. So get that in place. Get your closing statement. Who here has not reviewed a HUD? Anybody here not review a HUD before? All right, looks like everybody's reviewed a HUD. So in this case, the borrower, the seller, the mortgager or mortgagee, we're the mortgagor, property location, purchase price $995, settlement charges to buyer $892. That included real estate commissions, acquisition fees, different things like that. Total due from borrower $1,083,892.08. We get $1 million loan. Initial funding of $778,948. Okay, that initial funding that covered the acquisition of the property. From that point, we had to do draws. So we had to show the lender we had done so much work, and then they gave us another draw until we got up to that $1,040,000. Okay. So that's how that worked. And then here were all our loan costs. Oop, where's my little cursor? Oh, you can't really see that. Let me see. I don't think, let me go to annotation here. I just want the mouse. Yeah, it doesn't give me, let me see, spotlight. There we go. That's a little better. All right, so here's all the loan costs. Here are property taxes. It wasn't so bad in Texas yet. It's absolutely freaking terrible now. And this is just 5 years ago. Here's what's coming from the seller. Here's what's coming from us. So cash from borrower, $285, cash to seller, $393. So that was his proceeds from sale. He still owed $611,000 on his loan. So if we come on down, here are all the fees and the different vendors. So when I've told you, here's your real estate commissions up here. So Sperry, CGA of the Andrews Group, that was us, myself and my business partner, Keith Andrews. We were the owners of Sperry CGA, the Andrews Group. And so him and I split that commission of $29,850. In addition to that, our company, A&M Equity Group, the manager of Valari at Longview LLC, got a $35,746 acquisition fee. Okay, so yes, we took an acquisition fee on this. Our investors knew everything we were doing. Some of them were even in the brokerage. All right, so here was the mortgage company and their fees. Carrington, Solomon, Blumenthal, LLP. That was That was our, that was the lender's attorney. I was going to say, I don't recognize that. That was the lender's attorney. Our mortgage broker got his fee, $10,400. The tax escrow deposit, they wanted escrow taxes, so we put that up. Wallace, Jordan, Ratliff, Brandt, LLC, that was our SEC attorney. Partner Engineering and Services, that was our cost segregation study, cost us $4,200. And then A&M Equity Group got the acquisition fee of $35,000. And then it just keeps coming down. Total due from borrower, total due to seller. Okay, here was the invoice that we gave for the acquisition fee and what that acquisition fee covered. All right, so we invoiced it to the title company so that we were paid out of the proceeds of sale, which is what I recommend to you guys. Become a vendor. So if you are selling the deal to a syndication group, you know, some rock student, then you want to be a vendor on the HUD. That assures you get paid. All right. So in that case, create Sheena Harvey LLC or whatever you have to do. Do an invoice just like this as a marketing consultant and provide that to the title company to be paid on the HUD so that your buyer never touches your money. If they touch it, you're probably not getting paid. All right. You want to be a vendor on the HUD. And that's why I wanted to show you this. All right. All right. Any questions about the HUD? It's pretty simple. It's pretty self-explanatory. A couple of things you want to look out for: property taxes, proration of property taxes, proration of rents, and that the security deposits are on there so that you receive all the resident security deposits. If we go back to the HUD, where'd it go? Right there. Go back up. There's the recording fees, doc fees, the survey from Blackwaller. Tax prorations, principal, additional earnest money, initial funding. Yeah, we had to put up initial earnest money because we had to get an extension. Uh-oh, where's it at? Did we not get it? Am I breaking my own rule here? Appraisal fee, credit report, balance, lender, professional, environmental, acquisition consulting, settlement at closing, insurance binder, doc prep, title insurance, lender's coverage, tax escrow, endorsements, survey, pest inspection. Let's see. It had to be here somewhere. That was the other invoice. That was our invoice from our attorney. Oh, all right. I broke my own rule. Don't do what we did. Make sure that your rents are prorated on there, because if you're buying it in the middle of the month, all the rents up to that date belong to the seller, and all the rents after that date belong to you. So if all rents have been paid, the seller is not, the seller should not have entitlement to all the rents. They're only entitled to half if it was the 15th of the month. Okay. So you need to prorate those rents. You're entitled to the remaining 15 days. So you guys split the month's rents at that point. Same goes with the expenses. That's why after you close, you don't ever close out all your utilities and everything. You want to transfer utilities, but you don't close out all your accounting, because you're still going to have some utility bills to pay, some vendor stuff and things like that. All right. Broke my own rule. How about that? All right. Next is assignment of leases. You guys have heard me talk about assignment of leases. This is a big one. Okay. Assignment of leases and rents. Your title company probably isn't going to know to do this, but their leases have the seller's name on them, not yours. And if you take that to a judge that's being a hard ass, the judge can say, what gives you the right to this lease? Well, I bought the property. I don't care. Your name's not on that lease. Do you have an assignment of leases? And if you don't have this, you're toast. Dismissed. Resident, enjoy your stay at Valariat Longview. You must have an assignment. It just protects you. It costs $150 to have it drafted. Just have it drafted. Do it. All right. It will protect you in court. It's only going to happen on a hard ass a judge. All right. Somebody ask. Go ahead. Why in the world do I even know this? Because it happened to us. Trust me, everything I teach you guys are experiences that I have. I didn't go listen to some guru somewhere and I'm regurgitating everything they did. These are all my experiences. Trust me when I tell you, you want an assignment of leases. You may not need it ever, but that one time you do, you're going to be damn glad you had it. Promise you. Promise you. The other thing, while we're talking about it, that will protect you in court, if they're $2,500 behind on their rent and the 5th of the month comes around, because most jurisdictions allow 5 days grace, and you issue them their 7-day, 3-day, 14-day, whatever the notice is for the jurisdiction you're in, that you're going to evict them if they don't pay the full amount. And they come back and they say, oh my God, please, 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 you can't evict us. Let me give you $500 now just to save. And you take that $500, but you still proceed with the eviction. What's the judge going to say?
You wouldn't be able to evict them, David.
Correct. Because you accept, even if you had accepted $1,
yeah,
the judge will say you accepted money from them. That is their rent payment for the month. I'll see you next month. You cannot accept a dime from them if you plan to take them to court. Not a penny. Okay? That is considered consideration. And if there is any consideration giving at all, you're toast. Now, here's a problem you'll run into with career renters or career evictors, be more like it. And this has happened before. You show up in court and they owe like $3,500, hadn't paid in 6 months. And judge says, do you have the money? Resident stands up, says, I got it right here, judge. He said, hand it to that attorney. Well, judge wouldn't say that, but are you willing to give that money up for your rent? Yes, sir. Owner, they just bought another month's rent. They get another month. See you guys in 6 months. If they've got the money. Now, they're only allowed to do that once or twice. And then the judge finally gonna say, yeah, no, you're done. Bye-bye. But they will play that game. They will hold until you try to evict them, and then they'll pay the judge. Now you got attorney's fees and everything else you have to pay. You're no longer entitled to go after them for any attorney's fees, court costs, or anything else because the judge ruled in the resident's favor. In some states, if they rule for you, you can go after them for those fees. Will you ever get it? Probably not, but at least you can go after them for it. But you're out if that happens to you. So be aware of that. That can happen. That's just sidebar note. Okay. Any questions on assignment of leases? Well, other than Roger, you are a quiet bunch. I don't like quiet bunches. Okay, then you do a final walkthrough. Now, we had been on this property over and over and over and over. I spent a lot of time on this property before we purchased it. There was no reason for us to do a final walkthrough. I even signed a waiver in the final drafting documents of all the documents that we did not do a final walkthrough because I was more than comfortable with what we were purchasing. I knew what we were getting. But I don't recommend you doing that. I did it because we spent so much time on that property, working with the city, working with the owner, working with the residents, the property management company we were going to use, the project manager. I mean, we had everything in place prior to closing on this deal. And so closing date comes, we close, proceeds are all given. Now, what do we do afterwards? Now the work begins. Work hasn't begun yet. That was the easy stuff. Now the work begins. So now we got to get all copies of all the documents that were promised to us from the purchase agreement. Leases, tenant files, keys are down there, all keys to the property. Any maintenance records, capital improvement records, former drawings, anything that was agreed to in the purchase agreement now has to be turned over. All leases and tenant files, all keys to the property, the prorated rents, the tenant deposits. Get the deed recorded. Who's responsible for recording the deed?
Your attorney.
You.
I always make my.
Of course you're going to make, the closing, whoever's closing the deal, whether it's an escrow company, an attorney, a title company, they're going to record the deal, but it's your responsibility to make sure it's recorded.
Our attorney is like direct to get a fee.
Here's a question for you guys. You may or may not know this. Who is going to be the first entity to record with the county in this transaction?
Mortgage.
After closing, the mortgage. Why?
They're invested heavily in the property.
First one recorded gets first position.
There you go. Good answer.
First recording gets first position for the loan. So the lender within 24 hours will have that mortgage recorded. Make no mistake, it will be recorded fast. I don't know if all jurisdictions are that way. It's that way in Alabama. It was that way in Florida. I don't know if it was, I didn't ask if it was that way in Texas. But a lot of the jurisdictions, it isn't what, first lien. Doesn't matter what the document says, who recorded first. That's what jurisdictions look at if you go to court. What else we got here? Bank accounts opened. We talked about this with the property management company. Are you opening the bank accounts, or is the property management company opening the bank accounts? My recommendation is that you have them opened prior to going to the closing table. Otherwise, there is nowhere for those prorated rents to be deposited, or the deposits, or the tenant deposits, or resident deposits. Now that you can get a check, it is easier, because what is a bank going to do that you had just opened an account with that is brand new to you? What are they going to do with a $230,000 check if that was the rents from the previous month? They're going to hold it. It's what they do. It's what they're supposed to do. Could be a week, could be up to 45 days. Can they hold resident deposits? Can they put that on hold? Just shake your head like this, because that's going to be an escrow account, and they cannot hold checks to escrow accounts. Okay. So they cannot hold. If they try to tell you they're going to hold resident deposits, you just say, no, you're not. That's an escrow account, people. No, ma'am. No, sir. It's not happening. Legally, you cannot hold. Management turnover starts immediately after closing. You get on the phone, you call the property. If your property manager's waiting at the property to start the turnover, if it's an off-site, start that off-site turnover from the two management companies, but you need to make the calls so that those transfers can start happening right away. Get the utilities transferred, find out from your management company, do you have to do that, or can they do that? I did it as the owner of the management company for our properties, but depends on the jurisdiction you're in. They may not allow the management company to do it, so you'll have to do it. Now, here's a tip on utilities. All utility companies will have what they call a landlord agreement. And what that means is when a resident moves out, the utility bill just transfers into the owner's name rather than being shut off. You don't want it shut off. You can't go in and do your churn on the property or on the apartment if the water's off and if the electric's off. You need those things on. So under a landlord agreement, they'll just roll it into the landlord's account. And then once a resident moves in, the resident goes and turns it over, and then it goes back into their account. And there will be in the lease agreement how many days they have to get that turned over before you can start billing them for it. That will not include, or what it will not do is they'll not, if the resident stops paying, it will not roll over to you. They'll shut it off then if it's due to non-payment. But if they move out and they're just closing the account, when they close the account, that's when it moves over to you. So I always highly, highly recommend that you have a landlord agreement with your utility companies. It makes life so much easier. And then vendor contracts. You got to get them re-signed. So you're going to have to you should have already contacted all the vendors, renegotiated everything you're doing with the vendors on the ones you can renegotiate with. Like I said, CoinMax, one of the hardest ever that I've seen to negotiate with. But you're going to want to get the new contracts drafted and signed and in place. Then you want to get with the city. And if the city requires you to have a business license, you want to file for your business license at this point. So you just take your operating agreement. You really don't need, everybody says we need an operating agreement. No, operating agreements are private. They do not need the operating agreement. What they need are the articles of organization for an LLC. You do not need to show them an operating agreement. Your lender, your bank, you go to open a bank account. The bank says we need your operating agreement. No, you don't. You need my articles of organization. Oh yeah, that'll work. Okay. You don't need the operating agreement's private. It is not public information. The articles of organization is public information. Okay. Now, if you have employees, if it's a large property and there are employees, you're going to have to arrange with the management company for W-2s, I-9s, tax withholding, workers' comp and unemployment, medical, dental, vision, short-term, long-term disability, life insurance, and then, of course, payroll. So find out what they're going to be responsible for and what they're having you be responsible for so that all these get in place. And then you want to get with your CPA and let your CPA know who's paying what, where, when, why, and how. And it especially becomes important with tax withholding, because the one thing the IRS doesn't mess around with is employment tax. They will come after you in a heartbeat for employment tax. Do not mess with employment tax. Okay, if you are an employer, you are responsible for withholding and filing those taxes on a monthly basis. If you do not, you are putting yourself between you and a set of bars that you don't want to ever get in front of. Trust me. Well, I can't say trust me. I've never been to jail. So that is the one thing I cannot talk about experience from. Thank God. Gladly not talk about experience from. Contractors. Okay. A lot of people skip this part. They just hire, handshake. You do that, you're setting yourself up. You want to get a W-9. W-9 is the same thing as a W-2, or what is it? What's the form that, yeah,
1099?
No, 1099 is what they get. What's the form that you fill out when you're an employee? It's not a W-2, is it? Maybe that is the W-2.
I think that's the W-9.
It's been so long since I've been an employee.
Yeah,
I don't remember what form you fill out.
If you're
Is that the W-2? No, the W-9 is the form you fill out for independent contractors so that you can issue them a 1099 at the end of the year. But I don't remember what it is. It's like the W-2. I think it's W-2. Yeah, it's W-2 because you fill out a W-2 and an I-9. The I-9 means that you're proving that you are able to work in the United States. So have them fill out a W-9. It's only required if it's going to be more than $600. Anything less than $600, you're not required to give them a 1099. Anything more than $600, you're required to give them a 1099. Workers' comp insurance, you want a copy of it. Any liability insurance. You want a copy of that. Their licenses, are they bonded? And so bonded and insured. Okay, that's what that is, bonded and insured. You want to make sure that they are all of this before you hire them, and get copies of all of it. Is there a scope of work? I gave you guys in the resources for this course, there is some scope of work worksheets that you can fill out, as well as a lien release agreement, as well as a subcontractor agreement, some examples of ones that I've used in the past. All right. So anytime they complete work, you're going to want to have them sign a lien release. That guarantees, once you've paid them, that guarantees that they cannot hit you with a lien, a mechanic's lien on the property, even though you've paid them. Yes, it happens. Just protect yourself. It's just an extra step, and it's a free step. Okay. So just make sure you get it. And that concludes the due diligence checklist.